you recently published People Analytics Explained. Well, when did it come out, and kind of what's it about? And thank you so much for joining the podcast to talk about it.
Oh, thank you, Cole. It's a privilege to have the opportunity to speak with you, and I have to say, I really respect you just keep being consistent with publishing this podcast as well for the community. However, I would say in Asia, these things are happening at a small pocket, very contained environment. Given the certainty that there is a boss for everything, right? So the line of hierarchy is very clear. It's not as liberal as what it is in the West. So there's no multiple consultations. It's just like my boss have more power than me, and then my boss's boss have more power than them. In this type of environment, you can scale things really fast and then get very advanced in a very short period of time. But that's given the fact that everyone do the right thing by one definition rather than everyone have their own perspective. Yes.
And you've spent, I think, the majority of your career, if not your whole career, in one form of consulting or another. What have you learned through that experience, or what are some of the skills that maybe you help share with people through the book? But also, what is it like doing people analytics from the consulting side of things?
Yeah, I think consulting, like what you said, a large part of my career is focused on either internal consulting or external consulting. So
Welcome to Directionally Correct, a people analytics podcast with your host, Cole Napper, and today's guest, Kinsey Lee, advisor of workforce transformation consulting at PwC and author of People Analytics Explained. Hey, Directionally Correct fans, this podcast is dedicated to you to help democratize people intelligence for the world of work. If you're looking to support the podcast, please make sure to listen weekly, subscribe to the Directionally Correct Substack newsletter, sign up for the Data-Driven HR Academy at datadrivenhracademy.com, purchase Cole's book, People Analytics, or check out everything else at colenapper.com. Before we get into it, a quick word about HR Bench, the company powering this podcast. You know, when we all started in People Analytics, we wanted to do strategic work, building predictive models, workforce planning, advising the C-suite, and most of all, quantifying the impact for the business. Instead, we spend months building dashboards and reports that should already exist. HR Bench eliminates that entire phase. Your HRIS connects, your metrics calculate, your benchmarks populate. This is not novel. This is day one, not quarter two. That means skipping straight to prescriptive analysis, storytelling, and taking action for the business. Want to learn more? Book a demo at hrbench.com/directionallycorrect. Find out more about the company powering this podcast and building the future of people intelligence. As always, all opinions are our own, and thanks for being a listener. I hear you don't eat orange vegetables or just orange foods in general. Why?
Well, how did you hear that? The
From
prep
you.
obviously works. I think the orange vegetable thing, right? Having one of these fun facts always is helpful because any kind of team ice breaking or whenever we're trying to like get a little bit closer with each other, I can always use this fact. Yeah. I think the problem with me is that when I was a kid in kindergarten, I saw one day in the kitchen some carrots dropped on the ground, and those carrots actually dropped in dirty water. Then I saw carrot again when I was having the kindergarten lunchbox meal, right? And I'm like, there's no way I'm eating that. Since then, I was allergic to orange vegetables, and that includes like pumpkin. That includes carrot. What else? Yeah. Oh, sweet potato as well. So probably not very healthy, but you know. What about you? What's your fun fact?
Not that. No, this is awesome. Well, I don't know if this is a terrible segue. I don't know if that motivated you to write a book in any
Um,
way, but you recently published People Analytics Explained. Well, when did it come out, and kind of what's it about? And thank you so much for joining the podcast to talk about it.
Oh, thank you, Cole. It's a privilege to have the opportunity to speak with you, and I have to say, I really respect you just keep being consistent with publishing this podcast as well for the community. The People Analytics Explained book was published last year in September,
Mhm.
if I remembered correctly. Short-term memory, like a goldfish.
Yeah.
So yeah, we had a lunch party in London, UCL, with together with the Master of People Analytics and Human Centric Management students, and I think everyone had a good time. So yeah, very excited to share that with everyone.
Well, what was the experience of writing the book like, and kind of who is it for, and like what was your inspiration for doing it?
Mm. Cole, I would be very interested in your book as well, the one behind you, right? And hear all that about your book as well. I think the book writing process, I'll answer it in a few different elements, right? So the inspiration of the book really is when the publisher first reached out around whether I will be interested in writing a book about people analytics. The first thing that jumped into my mind is when I first started, what are some of the barriers that I have encountered? And one of the barrier was I clearly remember when I wanted to get into people analytics, I went into a website called Data Camp. And they had this course called Introduction to People Analytics. So I went ahead, I did the course, I received the certificate, but after this, I received the certificate, I feel like I've learned nothing about people analytics, right? I end up learning how to use R to do certain like data cleansing activity, data modeling activity, but I still have no clue how to genuinely be a people analytics professional, right? So it's not until later where I actually got more opportunity in working in people analytics that I realized that, actually with people analytics, 20% data, 80% relationship, yeah, or at least based on my experience. So I feel like there's a gap in the market in for a book that's more focused on relationship management and the consulting
Mhm.
skills aspect. And no, there's particularly given the audience of the book being early career professionals, I think it's critical for those individuals who want to get into the field to get a view of how you can build relationship, how to learn to build relationship. That goes to another passion of mine, which is growing up, consciously or unconsciously, I've had the privilege of observing how my parents manage stakeholders. And
Mhm.
my one of my parents is in the financial services industry, and as a part of her role, my mom she will have to manage her own stakeholders, and I had that experience growing up watching how she does it. However, if I put my foot in the shoes of someone who does not have that kind of experience growing up, does not get to hear that growing up, potentially they can help. They can get some help with understanding some of these concepts I just hear day to day growing up as well. So that's another inspiration, I suppose.
That's awesome, though. And you mentioned it helps out with teaching people how to do consulting. And
Yes.
you've spent, I think, the majority of your career, if not your whole career, in one form of consulting or another. What have you learned through that experience, or what are some of the skills that maybe you help share with people through the book? But also, what is it like doing people analytics from the consulting side of things?
Yeah, I think consulting, like what you said, a large part of my career is focused on either internal consulting or external consulting. So I
Hmm.
started off in an internal kind of starting in analysis, but then starting to do a bit more internal consulting. But then I realized that there is a need for me to also learn more about consulting as an industry as well. So that's when I moved into Aon Hewitt, which back then was a HR specific HR consulting firm. Over there, I learned really valuable consulting lessons that
Hmm.
an internal consulting role wouldn't really teach me, and that involves, I think, if I narrow it down to two really key components, one is the ability to manage scope, And then the second thing is the ability to listen, right? And I think both of these foundational key skills really helped subsequently with subsequent jobs. And I think if we think about consulting as well as people analytics, the example I used in the book is the analysis and synthesis lens, right? So consulting really is
Mhm.
about synthesis, understanding how the problem fit within the broader environment, and analysis is really about look at the problem and then break it down into chunks to solve it one by one. So being able to integrate both of these lenses are critical for any kind of people analytics professionals.
Yeah, well, that makes a lot of sense. Well, can you we've talked a lot about, and I think most people just understand what it means to listen or
Yeah.
even being an active listener. What does it mean to scope? And what
Mm.
are like break that down for people who haven't been in the consulting space or who are looking to build those type of skills?
Mm. So, scope, if we put it in plain language, it's really about setting the boundaries, right? Setting the constraints, setting the boundaries of where you work, where your work will start, where your work will end. So, if I look at a specific people analytics related example, if I'm a people analyst that's just about to kick off a people analytics piece of work, the first thing that I will do is to book in a session with the key stakeholders that have requested the analysis to understand what is actually the problem and what does success look like. So being able to understand what does success look like will then help you narrow down to what are the things that you want to touch on and what are the things that you don't want to touch on. And with people analytics specifically, it's quite a fascinating field because sometimes I feel like based on my experience, when I have a consultation session with one of my stakeholders, the topic will stretch out very far and wide because particularly when it comes to people issues, everything's connected, right? So your talent management issues are really just a talent management issue. Sometimes you will link to learning, sometimes it will link to other areas, employee experience, for example. So it's critical for us to be able to narrow down that scope upfront. And being able to do that, I think it will require a lot of listening, lots of asking questions, and lots of bravery as well to be able to say this does not sound like an immediate problem for us to solve. What, given our limited capacity, what should we focus on? So it's also that ability to prioritize.
That's awesome. Well, I know one of the things you told me in preparation for the podcast is that you will share anything with anybody, regardless of kind of lacking a filter of sorts.
Yeah.
But how did you come about like doing that? And how does that benefit you in the jobs and the roles that you've had in this space?
Cole, I can tell you a very personal story, right? Another sign of me having no filter. So, what do you, do you know your Myers Briggs?
The Myers Briggs, yeah, the type
Yeah,
indicator.
yeah. Do you know yours?
I've gotten different scores in different times I've taken it, but I do know. I think I know my most recent. What is yours?
So mine, similar to yours, have changed, right?
Mm,
As I grow I grow in age as well, right? So in university, I used to be INFJ, right? Which is
okay.
more about I'll just interpret the last character more about judgment rather than
Hmm.
perception, right? Perceiving. But then later on, that got changed to ENFJ, which is more extroverted than
Yeah.
introverted. I think that's due to kind of me growing up from like evolving from 20s to now 30s, right? And the most recent score I've got, or the most recent Myers Briggs type I've got, is actually ENFP, right? So I have
Mm,
shifted completely from judgment to perceiving, I think, right? And the the biggest symptom I think of that is the no filters element. For example, if I was talking to you, right, I would think and analyze every single one of your behavior and then make a judgment in my head. But now I don't do that anymore. I just take whatever you say to me as it is and try to react to it without analyzing too much, right? So that's probably a manifestation of what you were mentioning about no filter. I do find this way more aligned with my personal preferences now, because right now my approach is more default trust. Yeah, so I trust first until someone breaks my trust. Where before I used to not so easily trusting with people. I used to have a almost like a guard up. Where now, maybe after many years of therapy, I'm like, it's all good now. Doesn't matter. I take everyone as they are.
Yeah, I was like, I mean, I've met you a few times, Kinsey. I find that very hard to believe. You were like, you like every time you're just such a, positive force on the room anytime you enter it. So yeah, that's really awesome.
Uh, Thank you, Cole. Thank you, Cole. I try, and I hope I will be able to bring some energy to people whenever we discuss or whenever we chat.
Well, for people who are listening only, they can't see your background. That it's like the middle of the night. Where are you based now, and where are some of the places that you've kind of had pit stops in your career geographically?
So I am currently based in Jakarta. We are actually speaking at a very fortunate time, because today is actually the beginning of Ramadan, which is a significant religious event in the areas wherever they celebrate the religion of Islam, right? So it's basically the end of a fasting period. So I don't know if you can hear in the background, but there's a lot of people celebrating out there. I don't know if they are dancing or
Oh, okay. I can't
singing.
I can't
There's
hear it, but yeah.
yeah, there's fireworks, a lot of loud noises. Everyone's celebrating, oh, a period of reflection and a period of fasting, constraining themselves so that now they can be new again, right? So that's the concept of it. Jakarta, I've been in Jakarta since now a year and a bit. So last year we moved over in February, and before then I was in London for 3 years, 3 and a bit years, from 2021 through to 2024, end of 2024, and then before then I was in Australia, and then moving across different territories. But I was born in China, so I moved to Australia when I was 60.
So you're checking off all the, the big boxes in terms of places to live and things to see. Well, I'm wondering what are the different kind of challenges and cultural context of operating in those different environments.
Mm, that's probably one of the most interesting things about moving to different countries to work and live, right? So I've only started kind of officially working full time in Jakarta for probably above 3 months. And so far, it's been quite an adjustment period. People sometimes say like Hong Kong and Singapore are like Asia for beginners, right? I feel like I've jumped in to Asia deep water for like intermediate without any kind of proper preparation, right? So a number of key things I observed that's really different between like a culture like UK and Australia. To be frank, they're quite similar. UK a bit more high context comparing with Australia, but they're quite similar. But in Asia is completely different, right? So the first thing I've noticed is around a sense of lack of individualistic tendencies, right? So here, it feels like everything's done with a community. So people would go to the toilet together, even, right? And that's completely different. The positive of that is that I don't feel alone ever, right? So at lunch, there's always someone to go to lunch with. In break time, there's always someone to talk to. But the opposite of that is then sometimes days can be unpredictable in the office, because in Indonesia they have this saying called nongkrong, which means a meetup that has no end, a meetup that just carry on, continue,
Yeah.
the hangout that just doesn't end. All right. And I feel like that happens in the office a lot as well. Sometimes one meeting can just become a non-crown session for forever. Same thing with the clients as well. So when you are working with clients, scope is then harder to manage. Then I was just talking about scope management with you, right? Scope is harder to manage when your client is used to working, kicking off, and then not ending until whenever you both feel like it's the right time to end. So that's one of the key differences, yeah. And another key difference is the work hours. So work hours here are a lot longer comparing
Oh,
with
really?
yeah, the working hours in UK or in Australia, where individual time are a lot more valued, yeah, in those kind of environment. The positive of that again is everyone's really hardworking. I feel like sometimes I felt like I needed to motivate the team members a lot more in the UK or a Australia environment, where here it feels like everyone's just ready to go, everyone's just ready to work. So
Wow.
that level of motivation is not as required.
Well, and you've told me that you see yourself as kind of a builder. That
Mm.
seems like an environment that would be so desirable for somebody who's looking to kind of build and create new things and not being kind of like a stilted hierarchical environment. I don't know. Is that what you're experiencing, or what do you like about it?
Um, well, I would say from a builder perspective, the current environment, I would say in Asia, it is more hierarchical. There are
Hmm.
more hurdles we have to cross, particularly around the hierarchies level. For example, everything needs an approval, things like that. Where it's more beneficial for builder is just the general willingness of the team to just create something um, out of out of nothing, right? So that's where it's really beneficial for a builder. In a Western environment, also because particularly in smaller companies or smaller environment or team that are not as defined. I remember we're talking about people analytics community being a really good example of that because we are a relatively new field, right? There's not that much existing hierarchy created. Therefore, it's a lot easier for us to be flexible, be creative, and be experimental in this field. However, if we are in a field that's already really established, like for example, like reward, there's going to be less flexibility, less creativity that's enabled through that kind of environment.
You know, one of the things you've told me is like how the concept of neurodiversity is an important kind of part of your identity.
Mm.
How does that play with like things like hierarchy and having not having a filter and like cultural context? Like is like how does that manifest itself?
Oh, Cole, it was difficult, I have to tell you. And I did not realize I was not neurodiverse until 2 years ago when a dear mentor in the UK have shed a light on the idea that I might have been neurodiverse, right? But for me, because I'm neurodiverse, I do not work very well with hierarchy, right? So
Hmm.
I question and I always challenge whether people in power actually really know that much more than people not so much in power. Um,
Hmm.
and that extend into, for example, education. Does a PhD actually indicate that someone actually knows someone actually know more than someone that's only got a bachelor degree, for example? And what else in within a working environment? Does someone that's higher up in the hierarchy actually know more than someone that's freshly graduated? Frequently, I find myself being able to disprove that hypothesis, right? That people higher up actually know. Because I think as people join these corporate environments, they become more and more conditioned to the environment, and the environment actually take away a bit of critical thinking from time to time from them as well. So I actually value the youngest and the newest blood within the organization a lot more. And I frequently get anxiety. I'm like, oh, geez, I'm really getting old. I don't really know what's going on in the high schools anymore. I don't even know what Roblox is. Roblox is. How can I keep up to date with all these latest things, which we know will become popular in 5, 10, 15 years, right? But not having access to these things really gives me anxiety because then we are not constantly learning. Yeah, I feel like I need to constantly learn what the youngest generation is thinking because that's just gonna be what's happening in the future.
So what's the youngest generation thinking in the people analytics world right now?
Oh, that's a good question. What do you think, Cole? What do you think the
I asked
youngest
you.
generation is
That's why
thinking?
you're here. Yeah.
Um, I think the youngest generation is probably more attuned with application of AI. Um,
Mhm.
Based on what I've seen, um, the younger workforce in general within professional services or within corporates, they are they feel they feel less obligated to rely on their knowledge, and they have more. I'm trying to find this word. They delegate more to AI. Where personally, I feel like there's always a bit of a barrier for me to trust AI, but the more digital native or the younger someone is, the more likely they are to trust AI. And another thing that's interesting, Cole, I'm keen to hear your perspective on it as well, which is the consciousness of data privacy. So my generation, right? Your generation, Cole, and the Gen X, I would say, the Gen X generation, which is above us, I imagine, right?
Mhm.
They would have really rigid view of data privacy. Where the younger generation I've seen, they are valuing data privacy in a very different way, and they're more open to sharing their information, which makes it great for the people analytics community, right? Because I think data protection and then data governance is one of the things that can make or break a people analytics project. And moving forward, would organizational network analysis e- be easily applied, given Gen Z's appetite and Gen Alpha's appetite towards sharing their data, for example? That's very interesting topic that I'm hoping to get your perspective on.
Yeah, it's something I think a lot. Like I just think the
Mm.
concept of being like a um like your civil liberties minded person is just dying.
Mm.
And that's always been something I always feel like my position in people analytics was sometimes an oxymoron
Mm.
because I care a lot about that stuff. And so it's like almost like you have to have someone who's guarding the hen house,
Yep.
who's like like a person who's like not a chicken,
Yep. Yep. Yep.
right? And so like because people analytics can do some things that frankly can violate those civil liberties. And so
Mm.
you almost have to have somebody who's very mindful of that. And what I see again, I think that you've noticed is people just don't seem to care anymore.
Yeah.
And and it's very strange in a time where you have things like GDPR and you've got
Mm.
all of these different AI legislations that have come out around the globe that simultaneously like regulation has taken the place of just norms around civil liberties and therefore people have just kind of outsourced
Yep.
their need to I don't know care about those things. I don't know. Do you have any reactions to that?
Yeah, yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think when you were sharing kind of your perspective, uh, is it a? It's not a hen, it's a rooster, no, rooster guarding a hen house, that kind of situation, right? It reminded me of like I was reading this book called the Friction Project, right? And then it's all
Mhm.
about how certain frictions are actually useful. So I think you're in this case, kind of your perspective is a useful friction in this process
Yeah.
because you kind of don't want it to be too smooth. Yeah, because that's how rights get violated. In Asia, I'm seeing absolutely, definitely, like for example, with my phone, I get weird insurance ads all the time. I don't even know how they got my
Mhm.
number, right? I think in Asia the data protection is still quite developing, so we're still having a lot of loopholes of numbers and then personal details being leaked. But the interesting bit is that because everyone's so used to it, it kind of gives them permission to gather these personal details in non-legit kind of ways, right? And
Yeah.
how would you feel if you go somewhere and they want your passport for you to get into the building?
I would not go in that building.
Right? And
Yeah.
that's something that just happens here on a day-to-day basis. I have to show my passport to someone to just get into a building. And then trust the fact that they will not take a photo of my passport and share it somewhere else. That's
That's a lot of trust.
Yes, that's a lot of trust. And or maybe going back to the non-filtering point, cannot be, you cannot have any filter, because if I have any filter and if I make a fuss on every single one of these interactions, I will just go crazy, because then I won't be able to go anywhere in this environment.
Yeah, that's so wild. Well, I don't know. Well, you've recently joined another Big Four consulting firm.
Yes.
What's some of the stuff that are hot topics there right now?
Oh, what you do, Cole?
What do I do?
Skills. Skills are
Skills? Is that what
huge
I
right
do?
now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, what's kind of the angle that you have on it, and like how does that relate to things like job architecture,
Mm.
compensation, everything?
Yeah, yeah. So, based on my observation, right, and a personal opinion, non-firm opinion, right. Personal opinion is that what I'm observing is lots of organizations, they, over the years, they have hired many different consultants, or they have hired many experts from the consulting firms who came in with their own methodology of measuring jobs, right. Some are based on a learning angle. Some are based on a more reward and remuneration angle. Some are based on talent management angle. There are many different angles people are coming in. So in the end, what they end up having is this monster duplicated ecosystem of ways of measuring skills and jobs. So they would have multiple things like your job family, job subfamily, job group, together with another system, which is kind of job grades, etc. And then you would then overlay skills on top, because skills are recently the hot topic, right? So an opportunity I identified is that there's a lot of opportunity in terms of cleaning up and start thinking about it from a more zero-based perspective, rather than work from what we've got. It's important to understand what's already in there or in the system, but it's also important to think about how work will evolve and then work it backwards from the future, and think about what existing redundant architecture that can be removed. But this then goes back to that loss aversion. People don't like losing something that they have. So that creates a very complicated discussion within different organizations. But I'm really hoping that through my role, my involvement, we'll be able to create simpler, cleaner jobs and simpler, cleaner skills architecture in the future.
Absolutely. Well, you want to join me in Cole's Corner, Kinsey?
Yeah, of course, why not?
Welcome to Cole's Corner. All right, let's start out with some rapid fire. If you hadn't been in your career in the consulting space, or more recently an author, what would you have done with your career?
Oh, I would be a teacher. I've always
What
wanted
kind
to
of
be a teacher.
what kind of teacher?
High school teacher, humanities, high school teacher.
Oh, why that?
I don't know. Like I've been a fan of teaching. And even like my first role out of university was like analyst role in learning development department, right? So
Mm-hmm.
that's where I learned a lot of kind of teaching techniques, 70-20-10 framework, all that. Working with the facilitators, get opportunity to facilitate workshop myself. I find myself most alive when I'm teaching.
Okay, well that's awesome. Well, this is probably a hard question for somebody like you because you've traveled around and lived in so many places, but what's the place you've never been to that you'd most like to go and why?
Oh, I want to go to Liechtenstein.
What is that? And where is it?
It's in Europe, and
Okay.
it's this small country that does not have an airport, right? I almost went there. It was on my list, and however, it just never got the spot during our 3 years in London, right?
Hmm.
So apparently, you have to fly to a nearby city and then take a bus or take a train there. But I just love the sound of word Liechtenstein, and then I've always wanted to go there because I wonder what's there, right? Um, can I say another one?
Sure.
I
Where is
wanted to
it?
go to Greenland as well, but never got the opportunity to go to Greenland because it's so big on the map.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
So,
big on the
I
map.
mean, you can't miss it, right? It's so big.
Exactly. Have you been
Yeah.
to any of those, Cole?
I've never even heard of Liechtenstein until, I mean, I think I probably have, but and no, I've never been to Greenland. Um, it's been a hot topic lately, but
Oh,
no,
what?
never been
Oh,
there.
yes, of course, of course. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, okay. Yeah,
yeah.
number apolitical. Yeah, this is not political. I just simply
I
wanted to
mean,
go there for the for the land.
just to see the greenness of Greenland,
Yeah,
you
of
know.
course. Yeah, the green
Yeah.
ice. Yes.
All right, I got the next question for you. If you were a character in any book, TV show, or movie, who would you be and why?
Oh, you have some good questions, Cole. What
Thank
would
you.
you be? Can I ask?
I'll answer after you answer. How about that?
Okay, okay, okay. I'll keep you accountable. Okay, so I would be. Um, there's this movie called Brooklyn, and it's
Mm-hmm.
about an Irish girl moving from Ireland to America and then set up a life there. I really resonate with the main character, Eilish. That's her name, right?
Mm.
And I think I would be her. Yeah, I think I would be her.
And why her?
Um, okay, because her story is very much about migrating, right? So she grew up in an environment which is Ireland, and back then in Ireland, I think there's a unemployment crisis, so it's really hard for younger people to find jobs. So she moved over to America. She had to go through the motion of homesickness, and then eventually find herself a new home and build herself a new home, meeting an Italian boy, right? That's a slightly different race, but from the same continent, right? And build up a brand new life in America. I find that story very similar to my story of migrating from China to Australia and then meeting a boy from a different race. Yes.
Okay. Well, there you go. We learned something today. Yeah, so what would I be? I think if I could be somebody, I don't think they're like me at all, but I
Hmm.
do love watching Don Draper clips from Mad Men when he makes
Okay. Yeah.
pitches. Like that would be amazing. I actually don't think that resonates with me at all. Of like actually who I am. But I think one of the funny things is, and I don't know if this is on purpose or not, but it feels like any movie or book that has a character in it that their name is Cole, I actually do tend to resonate with them.
Yeah.
And so like I think the guy in the Sixth Sense, his name was
Mhm.
Cole. I think
Mhm.
there was a movie called, I think it's The Perks of Being a Wallflower, had a kid named Cole in it. I was
Yes.
like, that definitely jives with me. It was one of my favorite books growing up, and yeah, I think it's just I don't know, any Cole character is who I am.
Yes. I just watched the Perks of Wallflower a few weeks ago. I know exactly who you talk about.
Exactly, awesome.
Yes.
All right, well, I've got one big question for you.
Mhm.
So the world is a really complicated place at the moment. And
Mhm.
for our listeners in the United States, what's going on in Asia, in Australia, in Europe, since those are some of the places that you've lived in the HR space that they should be aware of? And what do they know that we don't know?
Hmm. It is a big question, right? I think I'll deep dive into a key difference between kind of more Americanized culture based on my perception and
Mhm.
experience versus the more Eastern culture. So probably less for Australia or for the UK, right? But in in the Western culture in general, we like to make things obvious. So one of the things I had to learn um, when I first moved from the East to West is how do you say things that are obvious, right? So I was even thinking about doing a course on like how to say things that are obvious, and that's very much to do with cultural differences. So in an Eastern environment, for example, in China or Indonesia, if you keep saying things that are obvious, people think you're dumb, right? Where in a Western environment, if you keep saying things that are obvious, people think, oh, we're aligned. Because in Western culture, you value clarity, right? Where in
Mm-hmm.
Eastern culture, they value depth. And then it's about what's not said rather than what's said. So,
Mm-hmm.
given
What has
that,
not been said on this podcast that I should know?
I think I'm more converted into Australian culture now, which unfortunately means like I have nothing really underneath, right? but 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 what's yeah, that's just a joke, yeah. But I think what's
So funny.
going on with the Eastern environment is that there's a lot of good practice people analytics. So, for example, I went to this organization that they are like already so advanced in people analytics. They're already doing things that we're supposed to be doing in 3 years, social network analysis, all that kind of stuff. They've done it all, right? But that information is not getting shared because
Yeah.
sharing that information, number one, they might have the perception that they are bragging, and bragging is not a good thing in kind of Eastern environment, right? Number two, they are very conscious of their privacy, their company's privacy. So that's the second thing that help them say continue to safeguard this information. So what I'm observing in Eastern environment is that there are actually a lot of leading practices that's happening here, just not connected, just in very small pockets. So if someone that's in America that's hoping to kind of see what does like advance at a small pocket look like,
Yeah.
they can come to Asia and see. However, I would say in Asia, these things are happening at a small pocket, very contained environment, given the certainty that there is a boss for everything, right? So the line of hierarchy is very clear. It's not as liberal as what it is in the West. So there's no multiple consultations. It's just like my boss have more power than me, and then my boss's boss have more power than them. In this type of environment, you can scale things really fast and then get very advanced in a very short period of time. But that's given the fact that everyone do the right thing by one definition rather than everyone have their own perspective.
Absolutely. Well, let's do some what am I reading? So let me pull up the first one. This is from a LinkedIn post by Valerio Caprero. He's citing some research in a recent paper published in the Journal of Science.
Mm-hmm.
And the authors analyzed career trajectories of top performers across multiple disciplines. So, Nobel laureates, elite chess players, Olympic gold medalists, and many more. And their central finding challenges a common belief that intensive single discipline training at a young age does confer an early advantage, but this advantage fades over time. So,
Mm.
by contrast, individuals exposed to multidisciplinary practice early in life tend to start more slowly, yet, over the long run, they are more likely to reach world class performance, eventually overtaking the early specialists who often plateau just below the very top. And so, it's an important reminder that breadth early career can be a powerful investment in long term career success. What did you think about this one, Kinsey?
Um, I really agree, right? Because I think a few things about this, right? It reminds me of, I don't know how related this is. It probably shows my again my neurodiversity aspect. But the immediate thing that relates in my head is around cause and effect, right?
Mhm.
So I've been reading this book called Thinking in Bets. It's all about
Yeah,
like,
Amy
yes,
Duke. I've
you know.
actually tried to get her on the podcast unsuccessfully, but she's amazing.
Oh, yes, she's amazing. I would love to meet her. Annie Duke, yeah. She also
Yeah.
wrote Quit, right? Which is another quite cool book. But I like this book quite a lot, right? And
Mhm.
specifically, she's putting it very clear that, or like for me, something that has never been clear for me, that I struggled with personally is a linkage between cause and effect. What she's
Mhm.
highlighting is that life is not like chess. life is more like poker game, right?
Yes.
Because there's element of luck in kind of every single decision, every element of luck in every single outcome. Therefore, I think people that choose to specialize probably see life more as linear, right? More as chess field where they can predict all the outcome, and that's true to some extent. However, for those people who dabble into different things, they probably will end up having a more poker-like probability alignment because they are maximizing their luck surface area, right? Because the more the more people you meet, the more experiences that you have, eventually, based on my experience, they all connect. It's
Yeah.
just going back to Steve Jobs. I think it said, what did he say? He said the dots will not connect forward. It will only connect backwards. You will not realize until you have met all the dots or something like that. The dots always connect backwards. You will never know. So if someone's really intentionally going towards something through specializing, they might get really high in that hierarchy, but it might not be the most wise investment of their time.
Yeah. Yeah. I noticed this in the people analytics field itself as it's almost like there's archetypes of people I meet. And, there's the data scientist archetype, there's the consultant archetype, there's the person who just builds dashboards and runs report archetype. And that's all they are. And they can be quite successful quickly because they specialize into a single thing, but then they plateau, right?
Mm.
And they reach kind of their maximum NPC status,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and then they say the same things as everybody else that does that, and I find them to be quite uninteresting most of the time.
Mm.
And so I try to find really interesting people. And one of the things I've been playing with this idea lately, it's going to sound grandiose, but I think it's true. It's like I think I know more about people analytics than anybody in the world.
Mm. Yeah.
And it's not because like I'm awesome. I think I started like on that article on that curve where it was very slowly over a long period of
Mm.
time. But I mean, I have worked at big companies and
Yeah.
small companies and startups and in a variety of industries and taught at the graduate level
Yeah.
and written like, I don't know, I haven't counted, but let's say like 100 articles on people analytics and collaborated with people. I've had 170 episodes of this podcast. I wrote a book on people analytics. I've joined, this is my second people analytics startup at the moment. And it just like tackling every problem under the sun. I've worked at another vendor that sold data as a service for these types of things. And it's just like looking at a problem from every different perspective. And it's almost like, it's like, oh, I see. It's like, I feel like I've left a lot of those people behind nowadays. And
Mm.
I feel like I say things and like, oh, Cole, how did you come up with that conclusion? And it's like, well, because of the multidisciplinary nature of looking
Yes.
at a problem from a variety of perspectives, it really does increase your ceiling. So I guess my PSA on that is get out of your shell, get out of your silo and start bridging boundaries and it becomes a much more interesting world. I'll say that.
Yeah. And when is the Cole Napa digital twin gonna become available for us all to use?
I don't know. No time soon. I'll say that. But
Because you have the podcast, right? You have the podcast, you have all the articles, all the writing materials. It's all becoming like a part of your own LLM or small language model, right? Right now, but later on it will
yeah,
become a large language model, right? So the only thing you are probably missing is how Cole makes decisions. So maybe someone's secretly tracking that, and then later on
well,
they
I'll
can
say
make.
that a big influence on my decision making was Annie Duke's book, Thinking in Bets. So
Yeah.
if you want to know how to make decisions, that's a great book to read and check out People Analytics Explained by Kinsey Lee. She explains people analytics, so it's
Yeah,
good
so
stuff.
Annie will have to come onto this podcast now after she hear that, right?
I hope so. I wish you
Yeah.
would. Well, let me hit you with the next
Mm.
what am I reading article. So
Yeah.
next article is something I've been talking about a lot. I just can't stop talking about it, to be honest with you, is the power law. So we've got another article from Dr. John Sullivan, somebody we've covered quite a lot on the podcast. He says the stunning performance differential between top and average performers. And he's talking about this from the angle of recruiting. And he says he has this practice of creating a PDR, or a performance differential recruiting kind of index, and it's a way he evaluates recruiters who are able to differentially hire more power law based top performers. And so he cites some research from McKinsey all the way through Google, who says, high performers can sometimes be between 8 times higher value to 300 times higher value, depending on the role in the organization. And so he says how he's become the world's most aggressive recruiter after learning the huge performance differential of hiring top performers. And this realization forces you to become more aggressive because you simply have no choice of landing these high performers unless you use the most aggressive recruiting tools and strategies, which I don't know if I necessarily agree with. But he's saying they're sought out after by everybody, Meta, Microsoft, NVIDIA. And you see this wave of multi-million-dollar recruiting packages offered to candidates, getting $10 million, $20 million for because of this differential performance. I don't know. Have you experienced this or seen this in your career, Kinsey, about the power law, first of all, but second, the role that it plays in recruiting for potential talent?
I'm skeptical regarding that. Yeah, and can I confirm? I didn't get a chance to read it in detail. Was it just for Google, Apple, or these companies?
He cites research from those companies, but I think
Right.
he's writing it for recruiters primarily.
Yeah. Is it real world? Because those companies, in some sense, I don't see them as real world, right? They are the real elite of the elite, as per as per their ads, right? What what I wanted to comment on this is more around something I actually, one very large lesson of my MBA class is around, does performance review actually matter? If we take away the performance review, does it make a difference? Because I feel like, how is this guy justifying whether a hire is an effective hire or not, right?
Mm-hmm.
That is a question. Is it via performance review of this individual? And if it is via the performance review of this individual, is it worth it to look into whether the performance review is actually assessing the qualities that are
Mm-hmm.
critical for the organization's success?
Is that a rhetorical question?
Yeah, I don't know. That's a question for everyone to think about. Because from
Okay.
my experience, perhaps because I haven't worked at Apple, I haven't worked at Google. Maybe their methodology is more sound because they have more PhD, right?
Mm-hmm.
In those kind of environments. But based on my like on the ground in the market observation, right? Most organizations do not have a sound performance review
Yeah.
system, right? So when the performance review system is not itself flawed, right? And itself flawed. Not saying because it's flawed, then all the data is not useful. But how do we justify? How do we justify the inference from that already flawed system is not further diluting the quality of the information?
Yeah. I think your point is well taken on that there are poor ways of quantifying the objectivity of performance, and
Mm,
therefore to know if somebody is 8 times more valuable or 300 times more
yeah.
valuable in many different professions. And so the whole premise of it is questionable at that. Yet there are areas where it is quantifiable too. And then I think people tend to bristle when the results come out in a non-linear fashion, right? That one person is just not just twice as good, maybe they're 8 times as good, or maybe they're 100 times as good. And I think people kind of bristle at that notion. And I think this is why I'm going to go a different angle. One of the things I find is people, because I talk about the power law a lot, people are like putting me into a box about the power law. And like, I'm pretty sure every time I cover it, I say something different. And I'm going to say something different that I haven't said before here, which is I think this topic is at the root. It cuts deep into kind of this primal difference. Like to you talk about the MBTI earlier, there probably is like a scale is like, are you a person who believes in the power law or doesn't believe in the power law? And it's very polarizing into which type you fall into. And it's because it's almost a fundamental belief about human nature that all humans are kind of created equal and alike. And there is some variation within that, but it's the variation is within a reasonable difference. And then there are people who are like, no, human beings are not created equal. And some people are just worth more than others, and sometimes substantially more than others. And I think that people just fall into these camps. And so that's why it becomes such a polarizing topic. And so, some people say, well, we just don't have the data on it. So we can never know which type you fall into. And some people say, well, we do have the data on it. And because of that, we know that people actually aren't equal. And I think both of those people are wrong. And I think what you have to do is you have to find the situations in which you can truly quantify this information, but you have to treat people as like, equivalent human beings under, the eyes of a higher power, right?
Yeah.
And so you can't, if you fall into one of or the other camp, you're missing half of the equation. And I feel like that's why I keep talking about this. It's like I'm itching at a scab that that won't heal. And that's another reason why I think this topic is so important, because I truly think it is hit on the core nerve of the human psyche.
Yeah. Well, I always think the truth is somewhere in between. Yeah. When there are
Yeah.
people that have very um, well, black and white is not the best word, or very strong opinion. It's
Hmm.
never the truth is always somewhere in between them and the opposition.
Yeah,
It's not,
absolutely.
yeah, it's not saying they are not valid. It's just saying somewhere in between.
Hmm.
At least we know that.
At least we know that. Well, let me hit you with the last article that I've got here. And
Is
so
this the one about nudge?
it's about nudges. So, friend of the podcast, previous guest, Ludic Stellick, found some research in the Journal of Behavioral Decision Making. It was a meta analysis assessing the impact of nudges and the comprehensive second order effects of nudges. And so it says it's another piece of evidence showing that nudges may not be as effective as often assumed. So the recent meta-analysis synthesized 14 papers, or no, sorry, 14 meta-analyses, 1,600 primary studies, 30 million participants, finding that nudges show a small positive average effect. However, after correcting for publication bias, the pooled effect is statistically indistinguishable from zero. Moreover, the majority of existing meta analyses are rated as low or critically low in methodological quality, with no robust moderators of nudge effectiveness emerging. And so the implication is not that nudges never work, but is that their average impact is lightly overstated in the literature. And for policy and practice, this suggests a shift from broad based claims about what works towards more precise, context specific, and methodologically rigorous evaluations of nudges in particular. What did you
Yeah.
think about this one, Kinsey?
Well, we had a book from Richard Thaler, right? Called
Yeah.
Nudge,
Yep.
right? I think that helped people overestimating, because people have a tendency
Libertarian
of,
paternalism. Yeah, I
yeah,
remember.
yeah, yeah. People have a tendency of overestimating what's popular, right? So that book obviously has been quite popular, so it's becoming a corporate buzzword. So everyone's nudging now. But the fundamental is that just think about our parents nudge all the time. Do we listen?
Yeah.
Right? First few times it might work, but then afterwards we just, or personally from my experience, I just profile it as nagging. So is it a
Yes.
nudge or is it nagging?
Well, and let me build on this, because this
Hmm.
is kind of the point that I've had on nudges. I've heard other people make this point, but I love that you bring up the parenting example. It's that nudges don't work in the sense of they're trying to change your behavior. What they
Hmm.
are doing is they're signaling mechanisms to tell you what is right and what is wrong, or what's out of
Yeah.
bounds and what is in bounds. And it's
Hmm.
similar to your parents nagging you. You need to eat more vegetables. You need to eat
Yeah.
more vegetables. You need to eat more vegetables. And what they're trying to signal to you is we want vegetables are right and the junk food that you're eating is wrong.
Yeah.
And
Exactly.
organizations are trying to do that in many capacities of saying, don't cancel our services. We don't want you to cancel our services. Don't cancel
Hmm.
our services. And so they make it really hard to cancel the services because they're trying to nudge you to not cancel the services. But whose interest is that in? that's not in your interest. That is in the
Mm.
organization's interest, right?
Mm.
And so my belief on this has always been that nudges need to be in the receiver's best interest and therefore more likely to work rather than the sender's best interest, because all at that point that they're doing is just annoying people and nagging them.
Mm. Yeah. Two thoughts on this, right? Like, I think the first aspect is there is a bit of again, relationship hack or all that kind of stuff, which is the more you appear in a meeting, for example, the more
Mhm.
you appear in front of superiors, for example, or people that
Yeah.
have the decision making power, you are more likely to be remembered, and you're more likely to be talked about in these type of decision making forums. That's kind of one of those corporate hacks, right? That goes back to the point around it's in my interest to show up in more of those leadership conversations. That's why I keep squeeze myself into those meetings and squeeze myself into those environment where there's more decision makers, for example. That's
Mhm.
It's not really in their interest to see me there, right? So that's one aspect. And then another aspect is it's interesting because talking about the nagging component, I'm also curious about the linkage between nudging slash nagging with learned helplessness. Because
Ooh.
in Asia, a lot of the times we sometimes have overbearing parents and they would kind of nag us to behave in a certain way that's more aligned, or it kind of links to control, right? In terms of
Yeah.
you have to do what I ask you to do. So in the end, it then helps people develop a tendency of learned helplessness, which is oh, I might as well not do it because I'm about to go open up the fridge door. But my mom just told me, oh, I need to go open up that fridge door. So now I don't feel like doing that anymore because it's like a natural sense of rebellion. So I wonder, what are your perspective on how that links
No,
to?
I love that. That is such a good perspective because it's not just a sense of rebellion, it's that
Mm,
you're removing people's agency,
yes,
right?
exactly.
And so I thought I wanted to open the fridge. Now I'm
Mm,
not so sure anymore because am I just serving you? It's almost like the red pill versus the blue pill in the
yeah.
Matrix. Of like, are you doing this because you want to do it or because you've been programmed to do it? And I think that that is such a deep point. Thank you for bringing that up, Kinsey.
No problem. Some trauma there myself.
I bet. Sounds like we own have our our own demons
Yes,
that we're fighting in that space. Um,
exactly.
well, Kinsey, you've been a fantastic guest today. Thank you so much for joining the podcast. If people want to find out more about your book or about you as a human being, where can they find you?
Just connect on LinkedIn. I connect with most people that connects with me. So yeah, let's just connect and have a chat, have DM, something like that.
Absolutely. And Kinsey tried to get me to do multiple debates for that debating thing that you were doing a while back. I never took her up on it, but I wanted to publicly apologize because I think those were awesome. And I appreciate that's one of the ways I found out about you. And I think you do an excellent job in that respect too. But go check out our book, People Analytics Explained. You can find it anywhere books are sold. But thank you so much again for joining, Kinsey. You've been listening to Directionally Correct, a People Analytics podcast with your host, Cole Napper, and today's guest, Kinsey Lee. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Cole. Take care.